I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Hey, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, very happy to be your host. Greetings, revolutionary greetings, ready for the revolution, free to land, free them all those good things that we try to get into here. And certainly looking forward to another show. Going to have some fun this morning and introduce myself. I said Jared Ball, but really having now gone through the Wu-Tang name generator, I am the Midnight Worlock. So welcome to and as I think I was trying to say, have some fun with exposing the wizardry of economic myths. So greetings to everybody. Welcome, Sugar Booger. Good to see you again. Thank you very much, James. What's happening? I Manifesto. What's happening? Quaker Anarchist. What's happening? Good to see all of you. Please reach out. And as the ear doctor says, tell a friend to tell a friend that it's on again. That's it. Dr. Midnight. Let's get it. It's official. Midnight War. That's right. All hail Midnight Worlock. It's official. So as I'm going to come back to a little bit when we wrap up, it's Peace Namdi is going to be so I was looking into some of the background because I haven't really paid much attention to him personally, but looked into a little bit of Donald Glover's background, and I didn't know that that's how he got his name, the Childish Gambino, by putting it in the Wu-Tang name generator, and it came up with that. But I want to say a couple more things about that. Not the most recent episode, which I have not seen, but that mixed edition of Atlanta. Just a couple more thoughts on that. It's been on my mind, and I haven't really given it the proper due, but peace, James. Anyway, you know, peace, Lisa. That's anyway, anyway, I haven't given it its proper attention. I haven't done all the reading and listening to all of the other takes on it, but it's just been on my mind. So I do have a few more notes on it. I'll come back to towards the end of the show. But there are some more important things I'd like to get to. First of all, please do go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of the new merch. I'm ordering my remix mug today, and probably one of those bags. That remix bag is kind of fly. I might have to get that bag. And now that we have some women's fitted stuff, I have to think I got to outfit all the women in the household here. So please do. But this is where I want to start today, because so actually, wait a minute, maybe I should start with, you know what, I am going to start here, because I watched, so one of the things that I've been watching lately is a YouTube channel. I mean, totally like off of the norm of politics, but it's a music channel by this Italian dude, very popular. His name is Rick Beato, and he's got a long history in the music industry as a producer, and he plays all these instruments, and he sees like he you know he's you know and he deals so he has a lot of experience and background with the industry and the history, and a lot with uh, he knows a lot about the rock and roll history, some of which I'm actually very interested in, because there are some of the bands from that era, like Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin. I do like those bands. Jimi Hendrix, of course, is not a white band, but it's often thrown in that mix there. He hasn't done anything on the Band of Gypsies specifically, which is, I mean, he's still a white guy, but but really, um, and not even white at the level of Dr. James Nadell. Shout out to Dr. Nadell, who keeps supporting the channel. Appreciate that. We need to have him back to finish his psychoanalysis, or his I forgot what exact language he used, but his psychoanalytic look at Hendrix. But Beato had this interview with this guy recently, whose name I think I'm pronouncing somewhat closely, Ted Gioia, who has a Substack called The Honest Broker. And they had a conversation, a fascinating conversation, because I like Beato. Like, he plays keys, he plays guitar, he really breaks down. He knows how to read music. He really breaks down what's happening in some of the songs that I've certainly been familiar with. He does a lot of pop music breakdown and talks a lot about the music industry today and the history and the change and what he sees as a problem. And they had this really interesting conversation that dealt with a lot of different things, but touched on a couple of points that I think are relevant to what I want to get into this morning, into the work that I'm interested in. One of the things that is fascinating to me is that they talked about, I mean, they talked about a lot of different things, but one of the things that they talked about is so for me, one of the things I'm always interested in are the structural influences on culture. So, for instance, with the hip hop argument that I've been making for years, there's the dominant narrative, again, is that hip hop emerges. There's this cultural takeover. It browns America. It makes room for Obama. It makes room for Black businesses and for other Black celebrity. And there's almost no, or an insufficient look at what were the institutional influences that created the art, that has reshaped the art, the cultural expression, and that has certainly made sure that the wealth it produces benefits the same communities and structures that predated hip hop. So for all, and so in this discussion between Beato and Gioia, I think I don't think I'm saying, they're two Italian guys, and he's got Ted Gioia. I've already put the links to everything in the show notes. But Gioia has he's got a background in finance. He's got a background in music. He seems like a very interesting guy. In their areas. Again, I don't expect them to go far. Like, I don't expect them to go into areas that we cover here. And I'm not looking for that. So within their context, it's interesting and fascinating. And Gioia says something about how, so it's, he starts talking about the length of songs. And again, it's frustrating. I mean, I get it, and I know, some of my nationalist community don't want the investigation or the inclusion, but I have to admit that I'm frustrated by when I hear intelligent white folks having a conversation, but they're so limited by their Westernness. So, for instance, I've been watching a lot of some, what I think, for me, is newer research on biblical history, and there's all this fascinating stuff on YouTube and the internet about the latest that really makes it harder to prove that any of the dominant religious deities either existed or have had their histories told correctly at all. Particularly the question of, did Jesus actually exist as a human? Never mind the divinity part. But in all this brilliant conversation and debate and all this stuff that I find fascinating, they're so wedded to their Westernness that they can't even, they're not, again, Egypt and Kemet are afterthoughts. Africa is an afterthought that they barely consider. They're certainly not looking at the world from that point of view. So again, it's a reminder of all the value of Africana studies and the importance of an African perspective and a Black radical tradition perspective. And the same thing here. So again, I'm fascinated by the conversation talking about the length of songs and how Gioia is saying, how he's done all this study into all these other cultures, and he studies music even in the Western context back to the 15 and 1600s. He's got this long look at the music, and he says that, kind of just passingly, even the early Europeans, he would say, and certainly those in Africa, understood that you need a song to be longer because there is this relationship that people have always understood between music and healing, music and the spirit world, or music and trance, music it's more than just having a good song to listen to, but you need time, is what his study suggests or concludes. And I'm only going off of one conversation in one article that we're going to look at in a minute, but that has nothing to do with this part. So I don't claim to be an expert in this either, although I've seen, in my own research, limited in this area, I've seen there's been a lot on this. And obviously in hip hop and in the African world, there's always this understanding of the relationship of music and healing. In fact, I had submitted a grant last year that did not get picked up, which I thought was funny after I was listening to this conversation, that the grant would have funded me doing research and documentary work with Maimouna Yusuf about her and her mother and grandmother's lineage of doing music and healing, and again, a non-Western context. And I thought I actually put together a pretty dope proposal, and the project would have been fascinating, given her and her mother and her grandmother's histories. But it didn't get picked up. So then I'm watching this and I'm like, see, this guy has his research funded in a Western context to reach conclusions that African and indigenous people had reached thousands. But anyway, but he says that his point is that the music industry shortening the length of songs to market them and mass produce them to about 3.5 minutes has destroyed the possibility for songs to be used to create the trance. And the same, look, we've all experienced like even some of the best songs, like think of Stevie Wonder's As, it's like almost 8 minutes long. You would not hear that played in full on a traditional radio set. But when you hear it in its entirety, and you hear it certainly in a club, for instance, at a spinner party where Stevie's there himself and the club is closing out with this track, and you feel like you're in a trance. I certainly did. In the rock context, Pink Floyd, certainly. When you listen to Pink Floyd, I remember I had a friend years ago, who loved music. Black woman, loves black music, loves music, period. And I kept saying, but you got to like Floyd. I kept trying to make an argument for Pink Floyd. I was like, Floyd is dope. And she was like, you give me this music and it's got these long preambles. It takes forever to get to the song, she was saying. And then years later, she just sort of in passing said, you know what, by the way, I went back and listened to some of that Pink Floyd. And she was like, it was pretty dope. And the point was, you got to let it breathe. You got to let it. But even in their career, as big as they were, a lot of their songs were not put on the radio, or not put on the radio in full. So so even in their conversation with Beato and Gioia, they were talking about how you would hear, and we've probably all experienced versions of this too. I certainly have, where you either get you get the artist's record or CD or whatever, you see them live and they do longer versions. Or there's the B side with the extended mix. It's particularly in terms of dance, hip hop, club, house. You get the extended, even in reggae, you get the dub mix. because it was understood that for the manufacture for the capitalist process, they had to put it down to 3 minutes. But in a longer context, the unspoken part is that not only do you get can do more with the song and hear more music, but there's that trance, there's that you can really lock into the music. And really what they were getting to in their conversation is how the top song, they apparently some analysis was developed that said all of the best performing songs on TikTok are literally 16 seconds long. So what they were really starting with was how the industry was, and the new technology, the new social media, it was not only reshaping and constricting the length of music, but it was detaching younger generations from a true love of music, because they don't even grow up with music the same way. The songs are shorter. They don't go and buy a physical album anymore and kind of have to go through the process of really chasing down and falling in love with the music. They don't. The songs are everywhere in video games. They're playing video games while they're lit. So there's many other things happening that these two gentlemen were arguing. I think it's interesting that we're arguing as to why younger people are being conditioned or not having their love of music fed in ways that we would have had historically. And I thought that was interesting. I saw somebody mention Fela. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I'm seeing the context, I'll come back to the chat. I don't get lost in the chat too much. But certainly with Fela and a lot of great music, you need to, and especially if you're experiencing it live, to get into that, to get into that space, you got to hear. It can't just be 3 minutes. Or they even made the point that when you hear a song that you like, even if it's 3 minutes long, you might play it over and over and over again, because you need to hear it more and more and more. So I thought all of that was very interesting. That was all I thought a very interesting discussion and worth a watch of the video that I think I linked the whole video there. But the specific reason that I wanted to bring up that discussion this morning, is because of the article that they mentioned in their discussion that talks about, in the context of Netflix, why back in February, this guy, Ted Gioia, the honest broker, had predicted accurately that Netflix was going to start to drop, that their business model was going to fail. So part of what I'm saying, I didn't do this part justice. Part of his background is that he has a background in doing economic futures work, in predicting the future performance of companies and stock. And he was looking at the situation with Netflix and was saying it's not gonna go well for them. And the reason he says is I think of particular interest. So again, I've linked this here. You can read it because I'm using it for a very particular purpose today, at least, related to my own arguments around buying power and the reporting of this issue and its impact in Black political conversation. So all of that preamble about the music was just fascinating to me, but not specific to this particular to my purposes this morning, but necessarily that is, but something I definitely want to come back to in my hip hop classes next semester. Anyway, because I was even just thinking, I was looking for my old vinyl, like even songs like White Lines, one of the few vinyls that I still have. I mean, that track, I think one of the versions is like, was it 10, 12 minutes? You're not going to hear that, and some of those early versions of Jam On It. Remember back in the Jam On It, Jam On It, Jam On, and the Superman verse and all that, like those songs, and then the breakdown. I mean, they were long. And of course, a lot of it was so that breakdancers could dance, but that's part of the trance. That's part of the spiritual inducement part of the music that the record labels destroy when they move everything from down to 3 minutes or now down to 16 seconds with TikTok. Anyway, so but switching over a little bit here to get more specific, this is what he's saying about why he was predicting inaccurately. I think Netflix was it down like 70% or something like that. And they're desperate. And his key point, I think, relates very well to the argument that I'm borrowing still from Marisa Baradaran, that I think is evident in the buying power mythology, which is that, and the same argument that Michael Hudson has used. This is why I shout out to Daruba bin Wahad when Daruba, when he's telling me you got to read Michael Hudson, I'm like, I have, like, you should rap with me about it. The way I understand Michael Hudson's argument about crypto and currency in general is the same thing that Gioia is saying here. I'm just going to call him the honest broker, that the honest broker is saying here about why Netflix is going to fail. And the point is that only countries, and same thing with MMT, the argument around modern monetary theory, only countries that have the resource capability of a country like this one, the United States, can produce their own currencies and then spend and produce as much of it as they want if they spend it in certain sectors of their economy where they are able to be productive. Then it doesn't matter. Deficits don't matter. Debt doesn't matter. The printing, so to speak, or the digital creation of more money doesn't negatively impact anything because you're spending it in the economy in your own among resources you actually have and can develop, and that can be productive and produce something for your people, for your country. Where people get into trouble, as is often talked about in the case with Zimbabwe printing its own currency, is that if you are still having to import so much of your goods, for instance, and buy those goods based on the exchange dollar, the exchange currency, usually the US dollar or the British pound, you're not going to be able to keep up, and it's going to deflate and destroy your own currency, the value of your own currency. But that's not an issue facing the United States or other dominant countries, because they do have the capacity, both in terms of human resources, physical resource access, the manufacturing capabilities, and so on and so forth, to invest in certain areas and create and produce and generate not only product and services and goods, etc., but maintain a stable value of their currency in the process. They don't crash the value of their currency, despite what people are claiming about inflation, which is something we're going to come back to a little bit today as well, specifically around the reporting of it, because that's where I'm more of an expert, certainly not in the economics of it all. That said, so the same thing, that's what Michael Hudson and others have been arguing about this issue of currency and why crypto itself cannot work, because it doesn't produce anything, it's not backed by anything, it's not and it's not being managed by sort of in this case a state power that can invest it in areas of its own economy to again produce the goods and services and products, so on and so forth. It's just now a speculative investment. But this is what the honest broker guy is saying here about, and this is why he's saying Netflix is going to fail. He's making basically the same point, that Netflix doesn't have its own internal resources or the capability to develop its own internal resources. It is constantly, akin to Zimbabwe with its currency, having to import other people's products using the exchange, the established, someone else's established rate and currency of exchange. And therefore, they're going to fail as Disney and Paramount and Amazon all develop their platforms with their own resource access that Netflix doesn't have. So as he says here, but I have a hunch that these choices will eventually get simpler. He's talking about why we have we have all these different streaming services, and that's going to right now, and that's going to eventually change. Even I have suggested that this is unsustainable. This is predictable, somewhat easily predictable. He says here, but I have a hunch that my choices will eventually get simpler, and that opinion isn't based on any current developments. In fact, the evidence right now is that more platforms will appear, making the competitive landscape still more cluttered. In the short or medium term, I may even have to sign up for more platforms. But the long-term trend will, I believe, show a surprising reversal. And we always see this because, first of all, what he doesn't say here is that this is how capitalism works. It tends towards monopoly, at best duopoly. So you're not going to have a situation where we're going to have all these platforms surviving over time. He says here, I base this prediction on my study of similar situations in the past. The track record here is clear and unambiguous. Open shared systems always beat out closed proprietary systems. And when too many competitors launch standalone platforms, they merely accelerate the eventual consolidation. All right. So, by the way, that's the same thing with cryptocurrency. All these cryptos get launched, all these claims get made, but at the end of the day, there's only going to be one or two that are sustainable. And then even within the context of that flawed, horrific model that we won't get back into too much today. But anyway, so his points, he goes through some of these histories. He talks about credit cards. The first Visa credit card was issued by Bank of America in 1958. But here's the key point. It wasn't called a Visa card back then. It was marketed as Bank America card, and it was only available to Bank of America customers. The card was a huge success, and in the next few years, more than 400 other banks issued their own credit cards. None of them, however, capable of competing with Bank of America card. That changed in the late 1960s when hundreds of smaller banks joined forces to launch MasterCard. Bank of America was forced to open up its proprietary product and license it to other banks under this new Visa name. This case study suggests that a closed system run by a single company, no matter how powerful, can't compete with a shared open platform, allowing hundreds of smaller players to participate. But there are more examples. So again, it's the same thing. So Netflix cannot compete, as he gets to, and I'll because he goes through the other examples of ATMs, of Apple versus Microsoft. And the reason Microsoft took off is because unlike Steve Jobs with Apple, Bill Gates made his platform available and usable to much more of the world. Same thing with VHS beating Beta, and others and others and others. But as he says here, and the reason is as he gets to, and as I'll get to, is that Netflix, unlike Disney, unlike Paramount, doesn't have franchises it can milk, which can churn out Marvel and Star Wars movies with reasonable assurance in the market. And as I made a note here, this is the equivalent to why stateless currencies cannot survive, or why states that aren't resourced properly cannot create their own currencies. They aren't able to produce their own content like Disney any more than an isolated Black America can produce its needs. So this is why Marisa Baradaran in her book goes through that history of this claim that Black people in a segregated, that's why she said you can segregate people, but you cannot segregate money. A segregated people cannot circulate their own dollar, cannot invest in their own banks in ways that will allow their economy to grow and their people to thrive. This is what I've been arguing for the last few years now, that these claims that we need to circulate our dollar and support our own businesses are unsustainable and don't work, because you cannot live in that limited, in that isolated reality. Even when we were talking the other day about Black people having states granted to them and living independently as a nation within the nation here in the United States, an independent, another independent nation would just itself become a neo-colony, given its inability to access land, the resources that you can exploit and mass produce, the manufacturing to mass produce those resources. There's no way to compete. You can't, you cannot just circulate and work internally, because you don't have enough industry to take care of all the needs of your people. You don't have the ability to feed all of your people without importing this and that, without creating relationships with other countries and other trade agreements, et cetera, and so forth. You don't have the capability, even if you have land that produces certain crops, to manufacture, distribute, produce, mass produce, et cetera, and distribute those goods, and have enough people in your country, in this community, paying for those goods and generating enough money in their own lives to pay adequately for those goods, and at enough rates for those goods for you to expand, and so on and so forth. So, and again, this is the same thing with that he's saying about Netflix in a digital context. So it's even the same thing about, well, we should support Quelly TV, and we should have our own platforms, and this and that and the third. This is is the digital version of why Black businesses can't thrive and cannot lead and be part of component of a revolutionary change. They cannot grow big enough. Eventually, Quelly TV doesn't have the resources, doesn't even Netflix can't stand up to these other giants because they don't have that IP, that intellectual property that is going to sell all over the place. They don't even, Quelly TV can't even, as we looked at the other day, they don't even have the digital rights to famous Black figures like Malcolm X, which is owned by a white marketing licensing company. So even if Quelly TV wanted to create this Black-owned platform, wanted to create a Malcolm X film for Black people, they wouldn't have the rights to it. But this white company can actually, as we were looking at, digitally put Malcolm X in as much movies as they want, have him walking and talking and saying whatever they want him to. So this is why, again, I keep saying we need political power. There needs to be a political situation created where this is moot, where, again, if we agree to media products being created, the wealth created from those media products would be distributed in such a way that the inequalities we face don't continue to exist. Because as he says here, the next phase will see various companies in film, TV, and video starting to cooperate, sharing their catalogs and perhaps even their platforms. Other platforms and comparable businesses, podcasts, music, sports, video games, streaming, concerts will inevitably participate as well. They talk, for instance, about his arguments around Spotify. Spotify is losing money. Spotify is not. They really have a fascinating conversation about how the Spotify model. Okay, so this was going to be so the Spotify model, as they talk about, encourages a situation where fewer people listening. How did they break this down? In other words, wealth isn't being created by people streaming these songs, and because of the subscription rate, something about the model. I got to go back and look at how he was arguing this. I wasn't really ready to talk about it this morning. I'm still learning, but he was arguing that the model currently suggests that the more there is a disincentive, especially with the creation of NFTs and their expansion into music. There's a disincentive for more people to actually hear the music, because financially there's more more money generated by fewer people with more money spending on fewer streams of a song. So in other words, if you are subscribed to Spotify, if you streaming, no matter how many times you stream the song, it doesn't get a reach to a broader audience. And so the model is encouraging you to spend money to stream songs as much as possible, but not expanding the reach of those songs. So even in the NFT game, if you sell your album as an NFT, even if you until they get to the next level of creating a situation where where you buy an album and then your distribution of the album, your promotion of the album generates money both for you and the artist. That's what they say is the next step, and as a positive. They were arguing as a positive. Until we get to that step, we're still at a point where we're advocating that fewer people with more money generate the revenue for that art, and the goal of of music creation is not to have as many people hear it anymore. Anyway, there's something. It's something in there like that I thought was fascinating in the argument. But he's predicting that Spotify isn't going to work and is going to have to there's going to have to be a further collapse of streaming services musically, which will include what he says here, where he says like the ultimate victor might be Amazon Prime, because what you're going to get there are live concerts, streaming of video game competitions, podcasts, sports songs, comedy, and all sorts of other forms of entertainment packaged together in a giant killer platform. Just consider the alternatives. If you want to compete with Netflix, you can either one, try to find $10 billion plus to spend on proprietary movies and TV series, or two, sit down with your competitors and work out a way to cooperate. I know Disney and Paramount have opted for option number one because they own billions of dollars worth of IP. But don't expect others to do the same. The field is already too crowded. Netflix's proprietary approach based on sole control of intellectual property and intense hostility to all of the players is destined for a long-term failure. And they don't own all the famous IP. They've already had to give up they had to give up The Office and Friends and all that NBC stuff, and a whole bunch of other stuff as Paramount and Disney all start to put out their own platforms. And Amazon is making more money off of cloud services to the CIA than distributing films. Netflix isn't doing that. So Amazon would stand in place, is positioned to be this giant killer platform that gives you everything, live concerts, music, etc., and so forth. Anyway, so again, for my purposes, I'm drawing the parallel between what Gioia and Beato are saying is happening in the streaming platforms to Netflix. So in other words, if Black America, and more broadly speaking, the African world was Netflix, we are being told to compete with the Disneys and the Paramounts and the Amazons, who have their own IP and relationships to more intellectual property, and the studios that produce it. When we're being told to create our own stuff and encourage people to sign up for our service, and we're talking about and talking to us, to that small pool, to that relatively small size of Black America, at least, and saying, start your own business, support your own, circulate your own dollar, and you'll be free. And in fact, like this, at this recent conference held in DC, the Afrotech conference held down the street from me, around road from me here in DC, Black spending power and how to use it to our advantage was the main course for Afrotech Executive, Washington, DC. Afrotech Executive is still making its rounds, continuing to fuel leaders with the resources needed to not only succeed, but smash ceilings, move the needle, and make room for generations to come. Before it makes its way to Los Angeles, it stopped in DC for a sold-out event where the room was filled with corporate executives, founders, and investors in an effort to cultivate connections and also build community. What's more, spotlighting opportunities to cultivate Black wealth was the main course of the day on May 19th, 2022. So on Malcolm X's birthday, Afrotech got together to talk about spotlighting opportunities to cultivate Black wealth, where panels included the power of the Black dollar and cultivating capital in a Black tomorrow. Hey, but they ended the night with something sweet as DJ 5-9 set the vibes for a networking reception. The day kicked off with a conversation on social impact and how focusing on the Black dollar is imperative because just like the culture, we run the world. See, again, this is that same Black culture that's popular because of hip hop and whatever else, and therefore we run the world, not owning any of that. Not anyway, the wealth doesn't go there, the political power doesn't go there, but somehow white people marketing, promoting, and soaking up Black culture is running the world. And then here we are again now. At some point, I think I'm going to have to share. I think maybe I need to share at least some of this story if I haven't already. I'm not sure how much of this I've shared. So, because it relates to this reference to McKinsey and Company. Senior partner and leader of research on Black economic mobility at McKinsey and Company, Shelley Stewart III, hit the stage with Blavity's Tamara Gordon and highlighted the economic opportunity that comes when there is a focus on the people who make it happen as it pertains to buying power. The data is pretty compelling with respect to the opportunity, particularly if you're a business to consumer company rather. Black consumers spent $900 billion in 2019. They're expected to spend $1.7 billion in 2030. We are formidable in our economic life. And so as an executive using this to say, okay, how are we appealing to this segment of the population? And that has a lot to do with the representation inside of the company. Your philanthropic dollars, your lobbying issues, the vendors you choose to partner with, the folks that are designing your products, he said. It's using the facts to say we should be investing into the leading opportunity. With the demographics constantly changing to highlight all of the growth occurring within the industry, now it is an important time to pay attention to the power of the Black dollar. So McKinsey and Company have taken over Nielsen. So I think it's interesting that and I got to put all this together. So this is what I'm going to be, this is part of what I'm working on for this summer. But so in my discussion with Ben Chavis, the head of the NNPA, he said the National Newspapers Publishers Association, the largest collective of Black media, are no longer using Nielsen to calculate the buying power claims. But McKinsey's name, I'm not saying this is with the NNPA because on their website, they still refer to Nielsen and buying power. But McKinsey and Company has become increasingly popular in the references. They're almost at this point being referenced as much as Nielsen and Selig. But their methodology is equally bad, equally flawed, with the same claim, slightly rebranded as spending power as opposed to buying power. But it's the exact same claim. And the point is McKinsey and Company, as a non-Black owned global marketing firm, they are trying to, again, do the same thing of saying, white companies, diversify your investment, especially after George Floyd. Diversify, as we've already read here is being mentioned, diversify, hire some Black people, spend some money on some Black businesses, and here's why you should, because they spend $1.7 trillion. Now, as I've already talked about a little bit here, and I'll be writing more about in the coming months. And this is see, because I got a few, I don't know, weeks ago, I got asked to sit down and talk to people who are in charge of a lot of money. And the crux of the conversation was, Dr. Ball, we have all this money and we want to do something about that addresses Black economic inequality and some of the narratives around Black income and wealth. And they said, before we meet, look at this article and let's talk about this. And it turns out that they wanted to talk with me about an article that I had already referenced and been critical of from McKinsey Company about buying power. So when we had this meeting, when we had this meeting, the first thing I had to do in the meeting was politely let them know that they were misreading the claims, or they were properly interpreting poorly reported and claims about Black economic condition and misrepresentations of that situation. And they were and McKinsey was, and so they were saying, look, there is a potential here for corporations. There is a potential here for groups like that one to positively intervene and help Black businesses, Black communities with the gaps in wealth, by, I don't know exactly, somehow addressing themselves to this claim of the buying power. And the short of it is, I said, listen, the claims they're making are not accurate. They're based on nothing, and poor methodology, etc. And as I've shared here recently, I went and followed through on their claims, that is McKinsey, and showed how, by reference, they're misusing the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports on consumer spending, which, when I spoke to the rep from BLS, they said unequivocally, we are not making statements about Black wealth and income. We're not making statements about inequality. We are simply reporting survey responses that tell us where Black people are spending their money. So when I asked a specific question, but if this expenditure, for instance, was a credit card purchase, all your survey responses are going to say, yes, I spent $1,000 on a TV, but it's not going to say where that $1,000 came from. And the person I was speaking to said, absolutely right. We're not investigating the claims. We're not investigating. We're putting out surveys. How do you identify racially? Maybe how much are you earning? I don't even know if that was part of it, but the real crux of these surveys are, where are you spending your money? How much are you spending in what sector of the economy? So if I spend $1,000 on the TV, but it's a credit card purchase, it gets reported as a $1,000 purchase of a TV, and then it gets picked up in these poorly formed reports from McKinsey and others, whose goal is to take in ad money and to take in accounts from corporations and to help them better market themselves. They're not there to help Black people understand their true economic condition and improve it. So it gets reported as, hey, Bureau of Labor Statistics is saying Black people spent X amount of dollars on TVs. Add all that up, they're spending $1 trillion a year. White corporate ad buyers selling TVs. Here's a market of Black folks you could advertise to. If you put maybe a Black couple in your commercial, that's what. So and going back to the previous point about from Gio and Beato's conversation, this is where the mythologies start to get overlapped and confused, because this reporting, this gets taken into Black community. Look, I'm not going to say that I'm not making a personal judgment about the folks at Afrotech. They're getting these numbers and they're saying, hey, look, if Black people are expected to spend 1.7 billion, that meant to be that. I think that's a typo. That should say trillion, first of all, because They're talking about it's going from 900 billion. This is meant to be trillion. It's over $1 trillion anyway. But if they're going to be spending more than $1 trillion in 2030, now black people start to hear this and say, well, if they spend it, black capitalists hear this and say, if they spend that with me, I want a cut of that trillion. Certain nationalists and even other so-called leftists and others in the black community will argue, if we use that money, this was in the 30s and 40s, this was Du Bois's misconception, and that overlapped with a decade earlier, or a decade or two earlier, of what Garvey was saying. And that's why Garvey wrote Du Bois and said, this is where we agree. We both agree buying power is legit. So the whole branch of radicals, an entire wing of black radical thought at one point or another thought that this was real and could be used in a certain way. It's in its hyper weaponization at this point. The claim is misused and misunderstood by a number of again, the panoply of black thought, radical or not, and even by the people who were at one point considering going into some sort of working relationship with me. There was this idea that something can be done here, and then of course I come in there, foolishly saying, nah, it ain't real, and all of a sudden the phone calls dry up and the emails stop coming. Whoops. So the Afrotech people, we wanted to make sure that when the PPP came up and these other programs came up, that it wasn't the large banks, it wasn't the Wells Fargo Bank and Bank of America's of the world that got all the concierge clients taken care of first. So there was nothing left for these next generations, said senior consultant, senior vice president of diverse segments, representation and inclusion at Wells Fargo, Erica Miles. So, I mean, this is Wells Fargo, McKinsey, they are all getting together to host and fund Black discussions about what Black people can do to improve themselves economically. And none of it is about political power. None of it includes redistribution. It's all about investments, getting in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, you should listen to some Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd is dope. Anyway, so let me just jump in and see if there are any questions or critiques or comments. Yeah, absolutely. Ricky, I'd argue the myths are essential to how Afrotech markets itself for investors. Yeah. So again, I don't know if they're intentional grifters or not, but the grift is made easy in the sense, or is made more easily available, because Black man, that dog is, I hope you all don't hear that as much as I do. But the myth is, that's sort of my point about the myth of Black buying power, that it works to encourage Black capitalists to think that they're able to, gives them support for their claims. McKinsey and Buttigieg. What? The abundance of Black businesses are in people's houses, are in their apartments. They have no employees other than the owner themselves, and they don't make much money. That's where they are. Recently, I was reading Oxfam analysis, 99% of the economy. It mentioned how the bottom 50% has a wealth of only 1.1 trillion. Where the hell does Nielsen get all the Black numbers? So that's again my point. So this is what I was trying to show in my book. That when you ask, where the hell does Nielsen and them get these numbers? Where does Selig get their numbers? Where does McKinsey get its numbers? They get it from intentional or accidental misreadings of existing data that is not meant at all for assessing the actual condition of any group. So that's why when I read and I try to break it down, when you look at the Selig Center's methodology, it doesn't even make any sense. When McKinsey's methodology, I literally called I read one of their foundational historical book on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which I reference in my buying power book, and then I reach out to them. I just called the guy, and I got the details of the call in my notes somewhere, his name and all of that, and the date and all of that kind of stuff, so I can reference it. But the point is, that's what he's saying. He's saying, look, we're just offering survey data on where people are spending their money. That's it. McKinsey, Nielsen, Selig, they all take that basic or that raw or that basic summarized data point. Black people are spending this amount, and they're saying, oh no, that's we're going to call that power, and then we're going to, because it does have power in enriching me. The Black spending power, the power in buying power, is the power to enrich white corporations and add it represents collectible ad revenue. Because that's the point. When you read, and that's what I'm saying. So again, I don't approach this as an economist. I approach this as an Africana and media scholar, or someone assessing the narratives. So because again, when I read and this was one of the sources that I've gone to over the years, and they have a new study out that was taught in response to the claims around inflation. The Economic Policy Institute, when you read their reports, when you read the work of Derek Hamilton, of Diedrich Muhammad, of inequality.org, even some of the reporting that the backwards hashtaggers go to, the data is legit. Their analysis drags it into some reactionary conservative nonsense, and that's why we need soda. But the data is legit. Black people, Black Americans are not treated properly. Duh. But anyway, so what the Economic Policy Institute, a lot of the work that I've used is like this piece here from Josh Bivens: corporate profits have contributed disproportionately to inflation. How should policymakers respond? The short of it is, and I don't even pretend. So if I was using this sort of quote unquote professionally, I would make the point. I would go and find other stories, at least that try to address this issue, and then just from reading, make a comparative analysis to see what biases were in place, what conclusions were being reached, what were the inducements of the article. But the point is, I don't know I don't understand how. I'm not necessarily proficient in the use of economic data that reach these conclusions. What I am interested in the various conclusions being reached and the way that they're being argued, and narratively drawn and framed, etc. And then I go from there to work some comparison. So and what they're arguing here is they're saying, listen, all this stuff you're hearing about, inflation being the result of I don't know, giving people too much money during the pandemic or whatever, what have you. That's not what it is. The at least a good portion of it is inflation is being connected to corporations increasing their profits, not redistributing the wealth that they're creating, not reinvesting back in the economy. So here in this graph, normal and recent contributions to growth in unit prices and non-financial corporate sector, corporate profits. No, that wasn't what I was looking for. That's not. I'm sorry. That's not the one. That's not what I thought I was. Anyway, the inflation spike of 2021-2022 has presented real policy changes. In order to better understand this policy debate, it is imperative to look at prices and how they are being affected. And they're arguing that prices are going up because corporations want to make more money. I think that's the short of it there. The price of just about everything in the U.S. economy can be broken down into three main components of cost. These include labor costs, non-labor inputs, and the markup profits over the first two components. Good data on these separate cost components exists for the non-financial corporate sector, those companies that produce goods and services of the economy, which make up roughly 75% of the entire private sector. Since the trough of COVID-19 recession is in the second quarter of 2020, overall prices in the NFC sector have risen at an annualized rate of 6.1%, a pronounced acceleration of 1.8%. Why does this abnormally high contribution of profits to price growth mean? What does this abnormally high contribution of profits to price growth mean for how policymakers should respond to recent outbreak of inflation? Anyway, my point is that their argument is that corporations are making money, and that's why inflation goes up. I would have to get to another level of analysis to know whether that to assess the accuracy of the claim. It certainly makes sense to me, but I don't know the details of how they got there. The point I'm getting at is that article is meant to challenge the dominant the encouraged dominant frame that it's because we've helped too many people. We're having to pay people too much now because they want health care and they want an improved minimum wage, whatever all these other claims are. Meanwhile, they don't want to focus on the fact that it's corporations making a whole bunch of money. That's as much behind it as anything else. So all right, let me do a quick I'm going to stop there on that piece. I just that was just, let me do a quick transition and get to a couple other stories here. And then if you have comments or questions, please do put them in the chat. Please bring them up again if I've missed any. And don't be afraid to use that super chat function to make sure I don't miss it. And definitely like, share, subscribe, and do all the bells and do all the sharing and all of that. All right, let's get to a couple more things here, and I'll be back in just a quick second. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. So one thing, actually, there was one thing from that Afrotech thing that I didn't get to that I thought was, because I mentioned the music and the NFTs and all that. So, oh man, this is the other thing I hate about these websites. So Tupac is going to be an NFT. Turn Me Up, GameStop, Tupac, and Universal Music Group are heating up the NFT market. Discussions surrounding non-fungible tokens suggest that the market is volatile, could be facing significant challenges soon, but the creators entering NFT community are responding with the words of former Atlanta Housewives star Portia Williams. Who said that? Oh, that's who should we? Well, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, a Taiwan fried chicken shop launching NFT. Let's see. Legendary rapper Tupac Shakur has long been the center of conversations regarding the reality of his afterlife journey. No matter where you fall on the spectrum of that conversation, Shakur will live on in the digital world. TMZ reports that the late rapper's album, The Don Killuminati, The 7-Day Theory, cover art will be turned into one of one NFT. The controversial piece depicts Shakur as Jesus Christ during the crucifixion. Okay, well, that's great. Universal Music Group, Kendrick Lamar recently released his latest album, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. The label behind the Compton-based rapper is allowing the artist to create NFTs via LimeWire, according to Decrypt. So what I think is interesting about this story is that Universal Music, who owns Kendrick's music, and I'm not sure who owns Pac's. I wonder, probably the same entity. Wasn't that through Death Row and Interscope and Universal? Isn't that all the same thing? I don't know, but they're turning, you're worth more dead than alive. Turn the art into an NFT. And if, I'm sure that'll be good for somebody. Oh, by the way, one point I did forget to mention here. In that Beato Gaio conversation, they talked about Hollywood being controlled by Silicon Valley tech companies, which is, I think, an interesting point to consider, that the film industry, not that it's ever been a positive, is less concerned with being artistic and more conforming to the platform controllers of Apple, Disney, etc. Anyway, I don't know. Anyway, but one thing I forgot to mention is that I've been thinking also about this El Salvador issue with crypto, and this one note I wrote here: El Salvador is the colonial model of crypto. No ability to produce its own coin, as the MMT advocates argue. No economic freedom from the International Monetary Fund. No political power over a president, and no ability to produce wealth or redistribute it. So yeah, it makes sense that El Salvador would have been, that was my whole point about why they would have adopted crypto, because they can't produce. It's not going to help them because they aren't able to produce their own coin. They aren't able to invest and control the investment in their own resources. They don't have access to the resources to invest in, to mass produce, and so on and so on. So, okay. So I mentioned this other thing last week. I got to give credit where credit is due. So the other day we were critical of Dr. Yamada Taylor's article about Buffalo. I did want to share this one that I saw from Cornel West that seems to make a corrective measure, because Cornel West is, we all have our shortcomings, but he does say something in here that I thought, he goes somewhere that Professor Taylor does not in her piece, which I thought was important. Cornel West says, last year, Biden said America was not a racist country, and his vice president, Kamala Harris, backed him on that. But these are lies, and those lies have their effect. If we operate on that level, how can we ever address the vicious legacy of racism and white supremacy? And I think that was it. Because largely, Cornel West, he's got his thing to say about what happened in Buffalo, but he doesn't leave it in the hands of just the white right. And he makes the point about Biden, who he advocated we vote for, if I'm not mistaken. But who he says here described white supremacy as a poison. And he is right as ever. He fails to understand the gravity of his failure to make racial justice a priority, to see this cowardly white supremacy as a threat to American democracy. So again, that was really it. It's a pretty standard piece from Cornel West that is largely, I think, correct up to a point. But I was just happy to see that he made the specific point of calling out Biden and Harris, which is something I have not seen happening enough in the dominant discourse. Now, of course, this was in The Guardian, so I don't know to what extent that level of argument, even from Cornel West, is being brought over to the mainstream. But I did notice that and did want to quickly shout that out and acknowledge that. One other piece here that I wanted to mention. This was just in terms of continuing to look at messaging and narrative. Army of secret propagandists in Ukraine funded by U.S. to win Western hearts and minds for NATO policies. This is a very interesting piece. Our good friends at the National Endowment for Democracy, a CIA offshoot that tries to advance style of democracy and capitalism in foreign nations, provided the seed funding and provides about 1/4 of this funding overall, talking about the Kiev Independent, or the Media Development Foundation. Sorry, in my previous article on the Kiev Independent, I touched on the Media Development Foundation, MDF, a media accelerator founded in 2013 by the CEO and CFO of the Kiev Independent, Darnya Shevchenko and Jacob Peruskinsky. It's funded by the CIA NED, up to about 1/4 of its overall funding, and the remainder of which comes from the NATO affiliated agencies and right-wing groups. First, to train a network army. The goals of the organization are to train and network armies of freelance journalists, most of whom are interns, who work as a constant mill for papers large and small throughout Ukraine. This ensures a constant stream of pro-NATO and pro-US propaganda spread throughout the Ukrainian press. Secondly, and this is what I also thought was funny, noting the reference to McKinsey and Company again. Second, to provide the McKinsey-style consultancy for these papers. MDF can offer advertising support, foreign grants, and search engine optimization, along with experienced web designers and marketing. This, along with the access to their content mills, can greatly improve the fortunes of a news outlet. Many of the papers they have worked with are or have become very successful. This comes with strings attached, of course, and those strings lead back to Washington. I think I should. I don't know if it would work for the second edition of the book, but I think I should do. So I have a cryptoganda piece I'm working on for the Organization of Propaganda Studies. I think I should do another one just on, not that I churn these out easily, and not that this is easy for me to do, and I can, like it doesn't take me a week to write one line. By the way, that reminds when Kendrick talked about, speaking of Kendrick Lamar, when he talked about a multi-year writing block issue, I feel that. I feel permanently in a state of writer's block. Anyway, but I should do something that looks at the expanse, the reach of McKinsey now, because now that McKinsey and Company is playing such a prominent role in producing this buying power mythology, and it looks like it's found a new method. Now they don't even work as hard as the Selig Center to produce the nonsense. The Selig Center's methodology, though equally non-existent, is more convoluted in getting to that non-existence. But by the way, in these online debates and stuff about atheism versus religion, and science versus religion, apparently science argues there is no such thing as nothing. That even where they've tried to detect the most nothing of space, there is always some quantum material, something happening there. So it's kind of deep, actually. It's very interesting. And did you also know, I didn't know this either. Is this true that there is no such thing as zero gravity? It reminded me of Russell Maroon Schultz, rest in power, and his argument around violence, the opposite of violence not being nonviolence. His argument, of course, being nonviolence is the absence of violence, whereas the absence of violence is not the opposite of violence. The opposite of violence is countervailing violence. Anyway, but there's apparently no such thing as no gravity. That there's always gravity. It's just what we perceive as no gravity is the act of falling at great speed. So when we see astronauts floating around in their capsules or whatever, apparently they're not floating because of no gravity. They're falling. It's just that they're falling so fast and in rotation around the Earth that it appears as though they're floating in zero gravity, but they're falling. They're just falling while they're moving so fast. That's what keeps them appearing to float. I didn't know. I don't pretend to understand it. I just thought it was fascinating. Anyway, but I should write. But I should write something about this the encroachment of McKinsey and in their production of these economic, or the spreading of economic mythology, and their relationship here to the distribution of pro-West, pro-NATO propaganda. Because my argument ultimately in the buying power, maybe it should go in there. Maybe I should at least make reference to it in there. In fact, let me write this down while I'm thinking about it, because so McKinsey is New Selig, sort of. New Selig and Nielsen, sort of. But is also connected, apparently directly, or maybe not directly. No, it's not direct, but are also referenced in the context of global propaganda. I'll come back to that in terms of cleaning that up, but I just want to get that note in there. So because I mean, I think it's interesting that they're referenced here in terms of McKinsey style of these papers. MDF can offer advertising support, foreign grants, and search engine optimization, along with experienced web designers and marketing. This, along with access to so McKinsey consults people on how to get the best out of their messaging, their propaganda, their psychological warfare, their branding, strategic communication, public relations. And that's what is being done here through this MDF and its management. Of the third is to launch new media platforms. They did not seem to have a lot of success up until they hit the jackpot with the Kiev Independent. But what I think is interesting, and I'm sure that this is, I mean, well, we know that this is not a one-off here, and it, like, it's just not, it doesn't just happen in Ukraine, that well-funded, well-organized, state-sponsored maybe or not, entities can easily create and support media. So in terms of this one project, I mean, these are just some of the why is it not? So I can't select the text. Okay, it's just a picture then. Okay, so that's a screen grab. These are just some of receiving close to 100 applications from CEOs and chief editors, including business projects. We selected 10 teams representing the whole diverse company. So these are the 10 recipients of MDF funding and to do that kind of media work. And then they go and break down some of those outlets. The core of it all. In keeping with their mission, the MDF launched another project called Core in 2021. According to its site, Core is a brand new initiative of unprecedented scale. Not only we would like to help the existing local publishers bring their operations and sustainability to a totally different level, but also to catalyze new local media projects and ventures. There is a generation of new local media leaders, and we want to help them prosper in the new digital first, audience first environment. This is also an arm through which MDF creates its, again, McKinsey-style consulting work referred to as consultancy and mentorship. So in other words, consulting is being, and I need to make that, let's see, consulting equated to intelligence and propaganda work. That is fascinating. Because that is, I mean, I do try to make the argument that the myth of black buying power is a subset. It's just a subset of a broader psychological warfare initiative to weaken a potentially threatening counterinsurgency that is black people. And that's clearly the same thing happening here. Andre is a journalist and editor of Radio Svoboda, which is a Radio Free Europe's Radio Free Europe's Russian service. Radio Free Europe was founded by the CIA and is operated by the U.S. government. Andre focuses on the Donbass region in particular, where CIA-sponsored death squads have been carrying out countless war crimes for 8 years. Core does not disclose this naturally. So media, advertising, and propaganda are essential to war, to imperialism, and that's just what's going on there. That's just what's going on there, guys. Oh man. Hold on, let me see. Were there any comments or questions that I've missed so far? I know the chat. The chat is its own thing. It's not as though. Oh, Emma. I think sometimes you're too focused on being critical of me to actually pay attention and catch some of the gems I'm dropping. Ease up on the criticism, and you'll hear what I'm saying. What it has to do with atheists was the methodology. I was just making a comparison to some of the methods being used, and some of the arguments being used in the debates between atheists who were defending science against, Bible thumpers. And I think that there was a good deal of overlap there that I think I described fairly well. I don't know. No, I don't have a personal scientific analysis of zero gravity. I just thought that what I saw in from those who seem to be experts on it, they seem to have all the right credentials, are pretty interesting. No, that I was just saying that these scientists are saying there is no such thing as no gravity. That what we call zero gravity is actually gravity. There is gravity present. It's just not. It's not as. It's not. I guess it's work. It's not as strong or whatever. And again, when we see people floating, and we say that that's zero gravity, it's not zero gravity. Apparently, they're actually falling, but because they're in a craft that is moving so fast, like they're moving faster than the rate of gravity, something like that. And that's why they appear to be in zero gravity, but there is no such thing apparently as zero gravity. Yeah, it can get rough like that, like straight up, like one sentence can take me that long for real. Like, it's a mess. It's a mess. Anyway, so this other thing about crypto that I saw that I wanted to get to a little bit today is just another little from my good folks at Wall Street on Parade, from May 11th. Senator tells Treasury Secretary Yellen that crypto market is now larger than the subprime market that triggered global financial crisis. I don't know if did we get to this at some point? I can't remember. Yeah, we did. We did do this because I remember talking about FSOC. So we must have done this on the remix. My bad. I just left it in my notes. But the point is, the crypto market is just as big as the derivative, the threats of crypto are now bigger than the subprime joint. So my fault. I thought I didn't realize. I forgot we got to that already. I'll come back. So that's good. Oh, I didn't get the subscription piece. All right. There was another story in the Financial Times about Black fund managers only get 0.07% of money invested in the market for them to manage. So, duh. I want to come back. Okay, so just a couple of other things left for me this morning. And one of them is a revisit of a video I made a little while ago. It's a short video that I'm actually I kind of really like what I was doing here. And I want to come back to that before I wrap up with a little bit on this issue of that show Atlanta. And then I'll come back and look for some more comments and questions before we get out of here. So let me show you. I want to play this video again that I made. It's only 7 minutes long. What I like. It speaks for itself. Let me leave it. Let me just. The documentary Fastball, in addition to giving us some fascinating background about baseball, also provides a great method for explaining the power of media. For example, media provide or supplement the narrative or story from which we then base our lives and make decisions, and give us a general framework for understanding our environment. And dominant media often tell us or reinforce for us the presets which govern who we think we are individually and collectively, what we believe and what we think we know. But just like a fastball, the ideas media deliver move faster than we can consciously interpret, leaving us often to use ideological presets to fill in the gaps between what we think should be happening and what actually is.
Our brain does a really good job of filling in gaps between the things that we see, and sort of allows us to tell a story that makes sense about what happened. In that case, where the ball is faster than your eye movements, the batter fails to reacquire the visual image of the ball, and the ball is now sort of beyond the point where he thought it was. He's going to look to a particular spot and expect the ball to be there, and the ball's not there. Now there's almost an error message that occurs. There has to be a new telling of the story.
Both the delivery of a person and a pitch involve an initial set of presets. For the person, these include race, gender, class, ideology, and identity. For the pitch, speed, spin, movement, gravity. And in each case, these presets are often powerful and wrong, but are delivered faster than our capability to see all that is involved in how those presets meet our lived experiences. To reconcile the error messages we get that inform us of the gaps we notice between what we are told should happen or is happening and what we actually experience, we require new stories, narratives, myths. Here again is where media demonstrate their power.
One story that batters' brains create is that the fastest pitchers can actually make their fastball rise as it approaches home plate.
Koufax, he threw a fastball, and that ball would start here, and by the time you swing it, it would hop a little bit up here.
You watch the ball leave his hand, and then when you get ready to swing at it, it rises.
2-2 pitch to Parrish. Got him swinging.
Dwight Gutton, he had a lot of jump and movement on the ball upward. There's very few guys that get that. You can know a fastball's coming, but it had that upward rising to it. And I could almost feel this thing hit my mustache. That ball really scared me, because you lost it.
Scientists say can't happen. The ball can't rise.
I don't know. I don't think they ever played baseball. I don't think they did. It may not sound logical, but it rises. And I don't want to get into an argument with scientists, but I have to say that in some cases they make a mistake.
It wasn't impossible for it to happen because it did. You come over the top and you hold a four-seamer this way. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 across the seams. It did go up a little bit. You have to throw pretty hard. The guys that throw 80s and 89, 90, that ball's not going to go up. Chapman, I guarantee you his ball goes up a little bit.
Devastating fastball. That has that late life.
It's impossible.
You believe rising fastball is impossible?
Yeah, I believe it's impossible. But I think, I don't think it's possible for a fastball to rise, but I think it's possible for a ride, something that's different.
Well, I tried to get the ball to ride. You know, if you talk to a physicist, he says a ball does not rise, but it does not drop as fast as others.
You hear guys that say they have good ride through the zone. You know, it's just the natural spin, you know, 12 to 6, just like this.
Once the ball leaves the pitcher's hand, the dominant force acting on the ball is the one we're all familiar with. It's the force of gravity. So the ball drops. Something like that. For a 90-mile-per-hour fastball, it's going to drop about 3 feet if the only force on the ball was the force of gravity. But a four-seam fastball has a strong backspin on it. That creates a Magnus force that's pushing upwards, so the ball still drops, but it drops slower than it would. And the trajectory the ball takes is something like that. It actually crosses home plate about 10 inches higher. If this is what a 90-mile-per-hour fastball looks like, think about a 100-mile-per-hour fastball. Perhaps with a stronger backspin and more Magnus force, it will have a higher trajectory and cross home plate inches above the standard four-seam fastball.
The visual was that it would kind of ride. It would kind of like ride up and away from you. Swing it. Fastball, how can I not hit that pitch? It always gets on top of my bat. Now that's a fastball that's hard to hit.
Physics tells us the ball is really moving in a smooth arc throughout its trajectory. The problem is if we go back to the first half of the pitch, there's very little difference in the trajectories between a 100-mile-per-hour fastball and a 90-mile-per-hour fastball. And it's the beginning of the pitch the batter has to use to estimate where the ball is going to cross home plate. It's not till the ball gets very close that he realizes that the ball is actually up here, and this will give the illusion that the ball hops upwards at the very end. It's not because it actually does, it's the difference between where his brain is telling him the ball is going to be and where it actually is when it approaches home plate.
I think scientists are crazy if they think that. I mean, Craig Kimbrell, it looks like his fastball rises every time he throws it. They need to grab a helmet, grab a bat, and get in the box because they don't understand what's going on up there.
Media are like fastballs, delivered faster than our interpretive eyes can see. And like batters trying to hit those fastball pitches, how we interpret the world is based largely on the presets we are given, or where we see the ball at the beginning of the pitch. And also, like the batter, we often fall back on those same falsely established presets to explain why we struck out, never really understanding what happened. So I really like that for a number of reasons. One, because even though I'm not a fan of baseball per se, I really like what the science that explains that. But there's so many parallels. So in related to today, for instance, when he talks about the difference being indistinguishable initially between a 90-mile-an-hour and a 100-mile-an-hour pitch, that's what is indistinguishable between the initial depiction of a black face in a commercial or as a pundit in media or elsewhere. The initial presentation is, oh, that's a black person. Oh, I get it. I know, especially for black audiences. Oh, I know what he or she is going to say. I got it. Or the expectation is, oh, I know she or he is on my team. And maybe we don't fully agree, but they more or less have my best interests at heart. So here comes the pitch, and they're like, okay, cool. And the pitch is, invest in crypto, start a black business, vote for the Democrat, don't listen to all that black radical stuff, blah, blah, blah. And we're over here at the plate of life, like, yes, okay, okay. But as the physicist was showing, after the ball is released, it's moving too fast. The eye can't keep up with it. So at a certain point, the eye loses sight of the ball. Our political consciousness hasn't been trained, because unlike the eye, that I don't think can be physically trained to catch it to those speeds, our political consciousness can be trained to catch these messages or better yet, before the ball is thrown, to assess the pitcher and understand, oh, that's the Vernon philosophy right there. I look at the pitcher. I don't even care what comes out of your hand or what it looks like. I already know what it is. But without that political education, we lose sight of the message. We lose sight of that as it's being delivered. And we're at the plate like, yes, oh yeah, vote for the Democrat, start a business. That's a home run. I'm about to hit the Black revolutionary home run and get paid, and my people could be good, and we swing in and we miss, and we're like, how the hell did I not hit that? The societal narratives kick in at that point. Oh, you didn't hit that because you didn't work hard enough. You didn't train hard enough. You got to the plate too late. Your pants were sagging. Your hair wasn't done right. Your name was messed up. Whatever the other stories are that are never. You lost sight of the ball. You lost sight of the message. The message itself was faulty from the jump. None of that. No. And that's why I think it's great to see all of these great hitters and pitchers. Bob Gibson, one of the best pitchers of all time. Hank Aaron, one of the best hitters of all time. And I think it's great that Bryce Harper was in there with his petulant ass. He's in there, and he's saying. And all of them are saying the same thing. Man, y'all don't know what you're talking about because you're not a baseball player. By the way, I was thinking of another parallel, a personal parallel maybe, where people will say, oh, no, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not in the Black community. You're not in the hood. You're not Black enough. You're not that. Maybe you need a little bit of an outsider. Maybe you need a little bit of that panopticon approach to say, no. You need that physicist to be over there saying, hold up. You need the non-baseball player to tell you that that's not what's happening. Only the non-baseball player can see, because once you're in the plate, once you're in the heat of battle, you can't see it. So of course it looks like the ball is rising. Of course it looks like it's my fault we didn't get it. It's our fault we're not free. It's we didn't support our businesses. We didn't do this. We didn't. Of course it looks like that. When I saw that documentary, when I saw that section of that documentary, I was like, oh my God, I gotta make use of it. This is so perfect on so many levels. And that's where all that advertising and propaganda is so important, because everybody knows you're going to be standing at the plate and you're going to swing and miss, or nine out of 10 of us are going to swing and miss. So how do you do that? How, just like in baseball, how are you great if you only do something a third of the time? If you're a batter and do something a third of the time, you'll be one of the best ever. You go into the Hall of Fame. You hit 3 out of 10 pitches, you're going to the Hall of Fame. Almost nowhere else would that ratio work. So to fill in the gap, they have to say, because it's so tough, it's so this and that, to fill in all the gap here, they have to say, oh, you're missing because you didn't get up early enough. You didn't work hard enough. Or maybe your people just aren't capable. I'm sorry. Maybe you just can't do it. Or they'll hold up the ones who can do it 3 out of 10 times. And they'll say, why aren't you like them? Why aren't you like the 1% of the best of the best? What's the matter with you? You're not 7'5" with a 50-inch vertical and can hit 3-pointers from mid-court? What's wrong with you? So that's anyway, that's what I see with that. I think it's a I love that video. I love that I did that video. I don't love how many hours it took me to do that video a couple years ago. A 7-minute video. That's ridiculous. That's why sitting here for 2 hours doing a live is way less time consuming. I have to admit that. But So I say that to say is a transition to wrap up here. And I'm still trying to work this. I think, and if you all have seen like something really well done on that Atlanta episode, please let me know, because I feel like I don't know. I would like to do something with it. I just don't know if I'm in the space to do it. I think there's a lot of I don't know. I think that there's more that there's something better than what I'm able to do with it right now that should be done. But when I think about that episode, the one with Kevin Samuels, the one that references ADOS, the one that has all of the mixed race stuff in it, and the pan-africanism or the anti-pan-africanism in it, I don't know. I think that there's something in there. And I admit, of course, personally, that there is a lot of parallel and overlap. But starting again with the fastball analogy, it's a media product. It's an FX. I don't even know the full ownership structure of it. It's a media product. It's a commercial product being distributed on platforms that are themselves, supported by private equity groups. So it's not here based on my standard Vernon philosophy of Black media avoidance approach. It's not here to solve things. So when I see a mixed character going through things that relate to me personally, I shouldn't expect to see myself in there. I shouldn't want to see my story told there, because it's not going to be told right. And of course it's not. I don't think, that's the other thing, my version, I don't think could ever be told accurately in this kind of media. I mean, I get it. I don't know what it's like to have somebody come to you and say, hey, we want to do a 6-part Netflix series on your life. And to look at all those zeros and say, nah. But I'm like, so even when they have mixed characters, I have never seen a mixed character whose experience has been told even with 5% accuracy to my own. Nowhere, none. There aren't that many to begin with, but I've never seen anything that it attempts to do with multiraciality, what has happened in my own life. And I shouldn't expect it. I shouldn't look for it. So, but I admit to being, I was like, wow, what are they doing here? So, so I just wrote a couple things here, just trying to think more about it. The mixed experience is being played with, and there is an inducement to separating mixed from Black and Black from African, and to have all this discussed in pop culture by conservatives, political hustlers, and entertainers or propagandists is a problem. Even if Glover is a genius, that medium and that space is not where conversations that I don't think get any deeper beyond that show, not sufficiently, are happening. And like, that's not where it should happen. And that I don't think that those conversations are happening enough in the right ways enough. I don't see them, at least. Whenever I see these issues coming up, even in places I think I would expect better, I don't know. And then, to my point, my story and its Black radical solutions or answers to my questions cannot be told and is not welcomed. And that's really what I mean by the Vernon philosophy for my particular. So like that mixed kid, even with the presence of a Black father and the absence of apparently his white mother, who we don't see, it's not the Black radical tradition to which he looks for solutions or answers. He's not invited to that in the show. It's not brought up as a solution in the show. It's the same thing. Like, as much as I liked and really, really enjoyed Queen and Slim, I kept thinking, like, what would the movie have become if those two characters, if the story starts with those two characters leaving a political meeting? And we all know a lot of romance and otherwise has occurred with people leaving those political meetings. You leave a radical meeting, getting a ride home. Maybe that's where it starts. What would the movie have been like if those two had been a member of an organization, a radical, militant grassroots organization? What happens in this show Atlanta if this kid, instead of hanging with all of the white kids and only being invited to Blackness because of some payment for college, is invited to the Black radical tradition as a result of his own experiences in his house. That changes the trajectory. And of course is why we can't see it. My next note, how does my experience or any of ours lead to revolutionary conclusions? And this is the part that I'm always frustrated about when pop media invades or imposes itself on any of our race, class, gender, sexuality, whatever the issue is. And that's why I don't think anybody should be looking for themselves in these spaces. When the LGBTQ community sees itself reflected in these spaces, it should recoil in the same way that I'm recoiling seeing mixed kids depicted. And so on and so on. Black kids, continental Africans wondering what their place is vis-a-vis Black America, when they see that story depicted in Atlanta or somewhere else, should recoil and should be invited and should have more of alternatives inviting them that are progressive, radical, militant, Black radical traditions invitations, which is of course part of the problem, which is why these products are encouraged and produced. They're given room. Because all mixed kids, Black kids, continental Africans who are first generation here, whatever, all are going through these questions and overlaps of questions and figuring their place out as they're just growing up. But they're only invited to find answers in these kinds of products. And then I just watched the new HBO thing on George Carlin too, and where he concluded at the end of his life. I still think the legendary comic. Talking about favorite white folks, George Carlin still is one of mine. And my note here is that maybe Carlin was right, because Carlin was saying at the end of his life, look, and I don't know if it was jokes, if it's serious or a combination, but he was like, look, I'm frustrated with everybody. I'm not rooting for humanity at all anymore, he said. He was like, when I see natural disasters, I root for the earth. He's like, if it doesn't have a high, if the news doesn't report a large enough body count, and he got a lot of flack for that joke, but he was like, if the disaster doesn't claim enough people, I don't want to hear it. But his real point is, and as he said, humanity has been thoroughly disappointing, and like he and these other scientists I was watching, I'm like all these overlaps with these debates. They're like, humans have only been here and technologically, industrially advanced for like just a couple hundred years, and the Earth is multiple billions of years old. And in just a couple hundred years, we're causing the Earth problems. Like the Earth deserves to get rid of us as a human race. Now, of course, some of us would, say, well, it's not the us and the we. Mr. White Man, maybe Mother Earth could be a little more specific as to who's really causing it. But if not, like my man says, they all got to go. It's like that broader joke. It's like, as Black people, we don't have all the time in the world to discern between variations of whiteness and non-Blackness that's assaulting Blackness. Like at some point, they all got to go. From Mother Earth's perspective, like, I don't have time to parse this out. Africans, Asians, Europeans, you all need to work this out. And if you can't, you all got to go. Anyway, I would say maybe he was right. I also made a note that I'm still not sure what Glover was trying to do. Yes, he references ADOS in the show, but then he also challenges ADOS a little bit with a Kevin Samuels line by acknowledging that the continental African getting shot by the cops who couldn't tell the difference between him and even the mix. Well, I guess they could tell the difference between him and the mixed dude in this sense, right? They were shooting him because they thought he was attacking a white boy. But the point was, they thought a Black man was attacking a white man. They didn't care about him his parents being from Nigeria or wherever, or how long he had been in this country. So I don't know if Glover was intending to make a critique of ADOS there, and he didn't know, unfortunately, enough, maybe to promote the not the opposite of ADOS, but he didn't know enough to promote what ADOS is always here in an attempt to negate, which is SODA, of course, the Solidarity of Dispersed or Diaspora Africans. But the point is, he mentions ADOS, but throws in that little bit, but what I'm asking here really, or what I'm concerned about really, is that the discussion about ADOS is first of all, it exists in that commercial space because, as I've been saying for years, it is a commercially viable argument. It works well with New York Times exposés, except in other mainstream exposés, because it's not arguing for anything of the Black radical militant tradition. It's advocating for white people to give us money, and only some of us. Not all the Black folks you see, just the ones we've defined as deserving. And in response, we're gonna be all up with the National Baptist churches and with the mainstream Republican-like, if not full-on Republican Party, Democrat Republic. We're not advocating for redistribution. We're not advocating for national health care. We're not advocating for anything. Just give us reparations. And we're not gonna, we're not threatening, and as we're doing that, we're condemning all of the revolutionary histories. We're giving you the one version of Dr. King about a check, and we're not talking about anybody else. We're condemning them. In fact, we're condemning pan-Africanism. We're condemning socialism. We're condemning nationalism, and we're condemning all of these things. So of course it would rise to the level of a Glover and be acceptable in reference to, in a show like that. Because ADOS arose in a vacuum we did not succeed in filling. That is, my generation has not succeeded in filling. I felt like when I was trying to help organize, all of us, we said this all the time, we felt like we were starting from scratch because we had stepped into a vacuum created by COINTELPRO. And for us, there will be no Baptist church support or Black church support, because I meant, when ADOS and I had our in-person encounter, it was in the context of a very well-funded white national Baptist convention collaboration or whatever. And that's why I was shocked that the white man in the suit had my check handed to me at the event. And for any of us who know what it's like to be on that who have ever been on that speaker's college grind, I haven't really been in it that much, but if you get a check the day of, that's rare biz. That's rare. Anyway, but the spaces I'm used to going to, first of all, don't pay. Second of all, don't have the funding for the space and for the technology that was at that event. I walked into the joint. I had no idea what I was like, damn. And then, and certainly don't get positive write-ups in the Times, et cetera, and so forth. So, in fact, as I wrote here in my notes, the Black radical tradition holds those institutions accountable. And I was thinking of Foreman's appeal to the church structure. Get busy with the money. Where's the money? And then I wrote here that Henry Louis Gates and Zahir Ali and Peniel Joseph have won this round. And that's another reason why we see what we're looking at in terms of the popular discussion of ADOS and its related problems, or the discussion of the relative, simplicity and backwardness of the discussion of biraciality and its relationship to the Black community and so on and so forth. And the same kind of depiction that even in 2022, where most recent studies show the exact opposite. In other words, that mixed people have if any passing has been done, it's been mixed people passing as fully Black, not as passing as white, as was depicted in here. And then the dynamics of how you're passing as white when your very black father is dropping you off at school. And how do you go from your father joking you about your white friends to you fully passing as white and not anyone even knowing that you were at all mixed until you try to go get that money from Kevin Samuels for the thing? Like, that whole thing was a mess. This is my fault too. I was supposed to have this pulled up because I was saying that Peniel Joseph and them have won this round, and we have to acknowledge that. And there was something in here that I had just seen the other day from George Jackson in Blood in My Eye, where he talked about acknowledging the state of defeat, and that not being so-called defeatist. I don't think he used that exact language, but just an honest assessment of where we are. And I think we need to. Well, this wasn't what I was looking for, but as he says here, after revolution has failed, all questions must center on how a new revolutionary consciousness can be mobilized around the new set of class antagonisms that have been created by the authoritarian reign of terror. At which level of social, political, and economic life should we begin our new attack? Dang, my fault, man. I should have, especially because my book is falling completely apart. Like, I think I just shoved the page back in here, thought I would get back to it and just didn't. But anyway, I'll check in the chat in a second, because probably some of you already have the page or the quote pulled up. But there's, all right, well, here's one. All right, here we go. It is not defeatist to acknowledge that we have lost a battle. How else can we regroup and even think of carrying on the fight? At the center of revolution is realism. Yeah, I'll just leave it there since I think my page got lost. My page is falling out here. So, okay, wait. Here's the rest of it. One or two dozen to call one or two or a dozen setbacks defeat is to overlook the ebbing and flowing process of revolution, coming closer to our calculations and then receding, but never standing still. If a thing isn't a building, it must be decaying. If a thing isn't building, it must be decaying. As one force emerges, the opposite force must yield. As one advances, the other must retreat. There is a very significant difference between retreat and defeat. I'm not saying that our parents were defeated when I contend that a fascist corporatism emerged and advanced in the U.S. Anyway, he continues. But it's not defeatist to acknowledge that we have lost a battle, is the point I was getting at. And I think we have to acknowledge that we lost a generational battle and maybe losing another one. That if nothing else, the previous generations to my own had advanced the struggle in terms of raising critical consciousness, raising levels of what should be considered standards of engagement, whether it's the more militant George Jackson, Ram, RNA, Robert and Mabel Williams, Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army, etc., or even the direct action of Dr. King. They had risen. We've been beaten back, I think, at this point, and are accepting even symbolic allusions to change as legit power. And there's certainly a propaganda system encouraging that all along, in which this episode of Atlanta, I think, is playing a part. But anyway, so that was it. I think that's it. I didn't even think I'd have 2 hours today, but here we are. So let me go through. If there's any comments or questions that I didn't get to, please restate them or feel free to super chat them, because it doesn't just go to me. It gets spread throughout the platform. We got some announcements coming to that end anyway. So definitely welcome, and now share, subscribe, and join. We already got this. Definitely need to listen to more Pink Floyd. Yeah, I like that line, Emma. There's nothingness and it's called crypto. That's right. And at the same, I think Franny French also said, I love the idea that there's no such thing as nothingness. I do too. So science apparently has proven that there's no such thing as nothingness. I think that's pretty cool. Crypto is not currency. It's also a distraction from how sovereign currency system operates, described by modern monetary theory. I largely agree with that. But my argument, though, is that the cryptogandists, part of their narrative is that it is currency, and that it will not only be currency, or is currency, but will be the currency that supplants the dollar. So, but yeah, you know what? So just so we're clear, I'll bring this back up. Because if you didn't see, if we don't remember us going through this on the remix, which I even didn't, this is what they're talking about. The senator tells Treasury Secretary Yellen that crypto market is now larger than the subprime market that triggered global crisis. Last week, Fabio Panetta, one of European Central Bank's 6 executive board members, noted that the cryptocurrency market is now larger than the subprime market, which triggered the global financial crisis. Whoops. As he says, this $1.3 trillion crypto market shows strikingly similar dynamics. There are about 10,000 crypto assets now. So my question, Madam Secretary, is one financial risk posed to the cryptocurrency is the concentration of ownership. Do you see any financial risk because professional investors and high net worth individuals hold almost 2/3 of the Bitcoin supply? Yellen said there could be financial stability risks if those professional investors were leveraged to the point that a decline in the value of the assets could trigger financial distress, which spills over to others. Yellen said that President Biden has asked the U.S. Treasury Secretary and FSOC to look at the risks presented by crypto, and they will be issuing a comprehensive report shortly. The short of it is, pun intended, that if high value investors who are the dominant holders of Bitcoin, 2/3, lose a bunch of their value as Bitcoin collapses, they will look to make up those losses, like in part by pulling investments from other areas of the economy. And if you're a large investor who has a large investment in some other more considered stable area of the economy, and you pull money out of that to cover your losses from all these billions and trillions you're losing in crypto, that could become a problem. So again, it's not so much that as the cryptogandists were arguing a few weeks ago and months ago and years ago, they're saying, oh, Hillary Clinton and Biden and all of the and whoever and they're criticizing cryptocurrency because they think that it's going to replace the dollar and their power is going to be low. That's not what they're saying. That's not what I think they're saying. What I think again, I'm not a fan of Hillary and Biden and them. But their concern isn't that the dollar will be replaced. The concern is that the dollars they're making from investors invested in other areas of the economy are going to get pulled out as people, like a run on the bank, as people, and in this case, the bank being other areas of the economy, of the market. If people, are losing money from one thing, they're going to pull the money out of something else, which is going to cause that to devalue. And then ultimately, they're arguing here that beyond just the issue of the crypto market, as is written here, what was not questioned at all by the senators on the banking committee that oversees the Wall Street mega banks was the $234 trillion in notional or face amount derivatives sitting on the books of these mega banks. So as I understand this, the same derivative thing that caused the problem in the last crisis is still in effect today. None of what happened in 2008 has been prevented from happening again. And those derivatives are connected to the crypto market as well. And it's with a total of over at least $234 trillion. Table 14 of this report indicates that just 5 bank holding companies are responsible for 200.18 trillion of that exposure, or 86%. The same dominant mega banks that we're all familiar with. So yes, they're saying if you want to talk about the concentrated risk of the 1.4 trillion in crypto, why not talk about the 200 trillion in the derivatives that are in addition to that 1.4 trillion? Anyway. And if I remember how the derivatives things works, you bundle everything, sell it to someone else, and then hope that sale happens before the value is collapsed. And it's like all these pieces that are that are packaged up in it, the smaller pieces that derive from that big bundle are worthless. Anyway, related note: scandal in France. The imperialist government paid 900 million euros in 2021 to McKinsey in 2020 for consultation. Really? KP Jen, please, if you can, send me a link. I mix what I like at gmail.com or wherever, and or share it on social media and tag me, whatever you prefer. Or I'll look for it. But if you find it or have it accessed, please send it to me. I'd like to see that. That makes sense. So we are the gravity, and mainstream media is the spaceship, meaning that they're moving so fast that we don't recognize. No. How does that work, Franny? So if we're the gravity and they're the spaceship, they're moving faster than we are able to keep our feet on the ground, and therefore just floating and apparently falling, or falling and appearing to float. Is that what you mean? Right on, Easy D. That's what I'm talking about. The only ball you can see is J Ball in the building. Anyway. Yep, Greater Fool Theory, House of Cards. Yeah, you all got your own thing going on in the chat. Yeah. All right, that's cool. Please keep it going. Feel free to keep all that conversation going in the Discord, the channel's Discord. The link is in the show notes as well. Thank you, Franny. Appreciate the compliment. Yeah. Nah, there's not zero hope. It's just that we just have to be, we just have to, we can't always just be saying, I don't recognize defeat. I've been passing as a fully 4%er for a long time. Yeah, that was the event. And the presentation I gave is on imixwhatilike.org. But that was the first time I realized that we weren't on the same page, I realized the extent to which we weren't on the same page, because Yvette that day and then Tone had each given, like, it was mild compared to where they ended up, but they gave these like little mild anti-immigrant, anti-Pan-African comments. So when I got up, I mean, I honestly thought like, okay, I'll just give a few comments. I'll acknowledge where we have some disagreement, and that'll be good. And I did that. And from there on, it went, from lying about what I was wearing to what I said. I mean, it was just a mess. It got pretty ugly. And they started tagging Morgan State University and trying to say like, this is who you have working. Like they would, like, I guess indirectly trying to get my job, the way they got Mark Thompson fired from his job because he put his hands on somebody that ran, I don't know, something like that. Anyway, but the presentation is up at mxwhatilike.org. I think it was a good one about education and colonialism. Yeah, no, my ego is not affected by yeah, I see by the chat. I don't bring too much ego to YouTube. It's not safe. You got gotta leave some of it. Gotta leave some of it offline. So I honestly don't know. I don't think we can escape capitalism for our greater good. There has to be a revolution, and I don't know how we get there exactly. But we just have to keep saying we have to. I think we have to keep organizing and advocating for one, and at least promoting the idea as a good idea. I don't know that I wouldn't describe myself as optimistic. I just but I think of it as a positive or in a positive sense, but we have to remember, I'm being very honest. When I come to YouTube, I'm not being dishonest, but this is a very limited version of my personality. It's a very curated. So I don't want to bring all of my pessimism and anger, which I think is an underrated emotion. I don't want to bring all of that to these spaces. Like, I also think about a lot in terms like when I see people put certain comments or say things about me elsewhere or don't mention me at all. And I think, I don't want to bring my initial reactions to these spaces, because here I'd like to think I want to offer the more positive energy that I have to offer in these spaces, because we get enough negativity. And I also don't want to be, I don't want to be mistaken for the other, folks that do YouTube or whatever and get into these arguments and be beefing with each other. And I don't want to be confused with any of that. So, but I also don't want to be dishonest and presenting myself as an optimist. I don't think that's what it is either, Yeah, you getting. I like to think of it as just a professional public version. I like to have fun, whatever. We have jokes, we do what we do, but I don't think the other aspects of my personality are appropriate to this space. That's all. And I kind of wish other people thought more like that too. I don't think we need to be our honest, complete selves in every moment all the time. I actually don't think that's necessary. Another Orient Revolution, bloody. We just not ready for that. I don't know that we need another organization. I think we need existing organizations to be supported. And I think what we're ready for or not can't be assessed online. So I like to be online to advocate getting offline to handle those questions. Yeah, we might be a little old-fashioned on that one. I think the newness seems to suggest, be all yourself all the time in every form and share everything. And I have to admit I'm a little old on that one. So anyway, good people, I really appreciate you coming through. I definitely appreciate you supporting this show and of course our channel. So please continue to do so. blackpowermedia.org, get some merch or whatever. If you can, drop some finances on the channel. But if you can't, I think if you just like, share, join, subscribe, whatever, if you just put these programs in your social media feed, as much as Sugar Booger and Quaker Anarchists do. I mean, if all of you did that, that would be great. I think somehow I'd like to see, I'm very happy we've gotten over 17,000. We're at, 17.2 subscribers to the channel. It would be great if at least half of them watched all of the videos that we produce. And if half of those hit the like button as much as they watch, that would be of great help to expanding the channel. So please consider doing all of that. Yeah. So that said, again, check the show notes for links to what I've discussed today, including the Discord. If you want to continue the conversations there, that'd be great. Put it in the comments, get you some merch. Like Fred Hampton used to say, peace to you, because we know you're willing to fight for it. And catch you tomorrow with the remix, all week with the remix. I'll be back again on Friday with another I Mix What I Like with Geechee and Brother Diallo. Shout out to Hiram Rivera, man. I heard you, brother. I hear you, my man. Let's rap soon. Anyway, peace, everybody. I know you're willing to fight for it. Thanks again. Catch you next time.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.